Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into something that affects how millions of us move every single day. India's absolutely massive transport budget. We're going to follow the money, cut through the jargon, and figure out what all these huge numbers really mean for the country's roads and railways. Let's get right into it.
Okay, just look at this number. Over 5.5 lakh crore rupees. This is the total capital being pumped into the entire transport sector for the 2026-27 fiscal year. Now, this isn't for patching potholes. This is the big stuff. We're talking brand new highways, new railway lines, new ports. It's a staggering amount of money aimed at literally reshaping how India gets from point A to point B.
So where does all that cash go? Well, this is where it gets really interesting. Take a look at this split. Almost half of all that new investment, a whopping 49.5%, goes to just one ministry, the Ministry of Railways. That tells you pretty much everything you need to know about where the big priorities are. So for this explainer, you guessed it, we're following the money right to the railways.
Right, so let's zoom in and put the railways under the microscope. If you really want to understand India's infrastructure strategy, you have to see where the money is flowing inside this one gigantic organization.
And whoa, here's another jaw-dropping number, almost 8.85 lakh crore rupees. Now, hold on. It's really important to get this right. This isn't all for new construction. This is the Ministry of Railways' entire budget. That includes everything, salaries, pensions, all the day-to-day running costs, on top of the massive capital investments we're talking about. It's the whole financial shebang for one of the biggest railway networks on the planet.
So let's break down where the real investment capital is headed. The biggest piece of the pie, over 52,000 crore, is for what's called rolling stock. In plain English, that means new trains, locomotives, coaches, the works. And right behind that, you see huge investments in just making the network bigger. Almost 38,000 crore for doubling existing lines so more trains can run, and another 37,000 crore for laying completely new tracks. The strategy is pretty clear, right? More trains and more tracks to run them on.
And here's a perfect case study of how these mega projects get funded. Let's take the famous Mumbai-Ahmedabad high-speed rail, the bullet train. Just for this year, over 6,000 crore rupees for this one single project is expected to come from Japanese loans. It's a great example of how critical that big-ticket international financing is for making these futuristic projects a reality.
Which brings up a really good question. You see these massive numbers, and you probably think, wow, that must all be coming from our taxes, from the government's main pot of money. But, the real story is actually a lot more complicated than that. Let's unpack how these projects are really paid for.
A huge piece of the funding puzzle comes from something called extra budgetary resources, or EBRs. Think of it like this. The railways have their own special finance company, the IRFC. It goes out into the market and raises money on its own by selling bonds. That money then gets funneled directly into railway projects. And here's the really clever part. Technically, this doesn't show up on the government's main balance sheet as debt. It's a key financial tool for funding huge infrastructure without officially increasing government borrowing.
And it doesn't stop there. Another vital source of cash is teamwork with the private sector through public-private partnerships, or PPPs. This is where private companies will put up their own money to build or upgrade things, like modernizing a train station or constructing a new freight corridor. As you can see, this model's already delivered projects worth over 16,000 crore. It's another essential way to get things built.
Okay, so we've gone deep into the railways. But to get the full picture, we need to zoom out a bit. How does this massive investment in rails stack up against the other major player in connecting India, our roadways? Let's put them side by side.
This chart just lays it out perfectly. I mean, the Ministry of Road, Transport and Highways has a huge budget, don't get me wrong. Over 4 lakh crore is nothing to sneeze at, but the total budget for the railways is more than double that. It really hammers home just how central the railways are to the government's entire transport strategy.
But it's not just a competition about who gets more money. They actually have very different jobs. The railways are all about throughput. That's industry talk for moving massive quantities of goods and people over long distances. Roads, on the other hand, are focused on creating that dense network of highways, and maybe most importantly, handling that last-mile connectivity, making sure a truck can get from the big expressway all the way to a small town. They're two sides of the same coin.
And what's really cool is how interconnected it all is. They even share some of the same piggy banks. Take this Central Road and Infrastructure Fund. You'd think it's just for roads, right? But look, it's giving huge chunks of money to roads, yes, but also to railways and even to rural development to build village roads. It shows there's a bigger, integrated plan to make sure all parts of the transport network work together.
So we've talked about these gigantic numbers and how the money gets split up. But that leads us to maybe the most important question of all. How do we actually know if any of this is working? I mean, it's one thing to spend the money, but it's a whole other thing to get real results.
Well, the government actually has a formal answer for that. This quote, which comes directly from their own rule book, says it all. They want to shift from just talking about outlays, which is just the budget, to focusing on outputs, the things you build, and outcomes, the actual positive change you create. So here's how that thinking works in practice. It's a simple three-step chain. First, you have the outlay. That's the money, the budget. Then that money is supposed to produce an output, a direct physical thing you can count, like the exact number of kilometers of new track you've laid. And finally, that leads to the outcome, which is the bigger real-world benefit, things like faster travel times for everyone. And this isn't just theory. Let's look at a real example from the budget. Remember that big chunk of money for rolling stock? Okay, so the outlay is 52,000 crore. The planned output for that money is very specific, putting 1,700 new locomotives into service. And the final goal, the outcome they're aiming for, a 4.91% increase in the number of passengers the railways can carry. It's a clear line drawn from the money spent to the result delivered. So there you have it. Billions and billions of rupees being invested, a whole complex system for funding it all, and a clear framework to hold everyone accountable for the results. Both railways and roadways are being transformed at a blistering pace. So the big question isn't about which one is better, but rather, how will this colossal combined push in infrastructure truly define the future of India's growth?